Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted. I'd also love it if you'd subscribe to my channel too, so consider doing that. So I felt like doing a ring today, and I wanted to do something that looked kind of modern, but also had some circular components to it. And I'm going to do something, I think we're going to call it a stacked circle modern ring, or something to that effect. It's about a 7mm aquamarine that's round brilliant cut. This kind of setting I think would work for a lot of stones with deep pavilions. It gives you plenty of room to work with, and I think it'll have kind of a sleek modern look, so we'll see. Before we get started, I wanted to thank my newest patron over on Patreon, Stephanie O. Thank you for signing up. I look forward to getting to know you and having your feedback and input in my Patreon site. I also wanted to thank all my other patrons who are kind of my core group of supporters, and I really appreciate all of the financial support and just the really great community they're building over there. So if you're interested in that, check out the link in the description, because it's a nice place with lots of talented people. The other group I wanted to thank are my YouTube subscribers. We're approaching 10,300 last I looked. That's amazing. Thank you so much for that. Thank you also for the kind financial contributions, like the buying me a coffee and the super thanks. Those kind of things help to pay for supplies, which I go through pretty rapidly since I'm doing 3 videos per week. I really also appreciate the truly kind comments that I get from you guys. You're such a nice group of people. Thank you for that. All right, let's get started on this project. This should be a fun one. Let's see what I drew up for today's project. This is one of my design idea books, and this is a different design on the cover, but there's about 5 different ones on my merch store, so if you like the idea of having a little sketchbook to come up with your ideas in, I find it to be super useful. I didn't used to do that, but it's become a good habit for me, because then I end up with a better plan, and it helps me with my drawings because I'm not very good at drawing. And it's got this little dot pattern in the background that's basically graph paper, but not as distracting as graph paper. So I like it. You should get one. It's a good idea. So let's take a look at the aquamarine. Where's my little stone grabber thingy? There it is. It's the official name of this, the stone grabber thingy. Okay. It's an aqua. It's got a few inclusions, so it's not a super high quality one, but it's pretty enough. It's got a good color. And it's about the right size. It's 7mm, I think. So my idea here is to create kind of a 3-level cage, sort of. I'm going to use 16 gauge square wire with some spacers between it, like that. Off the side of it, those spacers are going to be right there and there. And on the other sides, where you face it, when you're looking at it from this direction, you should be able to see the bottom of the stone sticking through there a little bit. I think I'm going to take some 10 gauge square and flatten it out a little bit. Normally I would roll it in my rolling mill to flatten it, but my rolling mill, one of my rollers broke, so I have to replace that yet. So I'm just going to hammer it a little flatter, and we'll go with that. That should also spread it out a little wider, so I can kind of get an idea how big of spacers I want over here. So I think my first step, the other thing is I'm going to put just a very short bezel up on top of this, and I'm probably going to angle the inside of this ring that I'm going to make out of 16 gauge wire so that the girdle of the stone sits a little bit lower, so it's just barely over the surface. And then I'm going to have just a tiny bit of bezel there that I can hold that in place. I thought about doing a prong setting, and I may do a prong setting like this sometime, but I think today I've done a lot of prong settings like this, so we'll do a bezel setting on this one. Well, let's go ahead and make a bezel for this thing that's relatively short. That'd be a good starting point. I think I'm going to use 26 gauge bezel, and I usually have a really tall bezel, but I'm going to cut it a little bit shorter. Okay, here's some 26 gauge. It's actually 3/16 or 4.76mm tall. I don't need it nearly that tall, so I'm going to cut it quite a bit shorter than that. And when we get ready to set the stone, I'll file it even shorter probably. So let's cut a piece that's the right length. One thing I want to start to accentuate a little bit in my videos, and I didn't do it much in the past, but it's a good suggestion somebody made, is talk about safety a little bit. When you're doing silversmithing, you're usually using flame and some chemicals. You want to take preventative measures to make sure you don't get hurt, first and foremost, and then have fun with it. But don't skip the things that keep you safe. So I'm going to go ahead and shape this around it, and then we'll cut it to the right length, and then we'll probably cut it in half or so, depth-wise. I'll put a link to my save. It's actually the very first video I put on my channel was a safety video. So the sound quality and the video editing may be pretty crude on that one, but the information is good. So I'll put a link in the video description for that. One of these days I'll make a new one that's a little bit nicer. Video editing was a bit of a learning curve for me. Doing something with my hand right in front of the camera. If you haven't been to my channel before, I use primarily hard silver sheet solder, and I use a liquid flux called My-T-Flux that I spray on with a spray bottle. Not everybody solders things the same way, and that's fine. You can use whatever method of soldering you like. This is just the way I do it. And let's cut it down. Should I be precise about it? That top part doesn't have to be perfect at this point. We're going to file it down a little shorter anyway, probably. This has got a relatively thin girdle on it too, which is kind of nice because I can get that pretty close to the top of this ring that we're going to do, I think, so we don't have much bezel showing. You could probably also, if you know how to do some flush settings, you could skip the bezel, drill out that center point a little bit and drop it down in there, and then push some of that metal over the stone. I thought about doing that. I may do something like that one of these days. I'm going to have a pretty snug bezel for this one. I'm going to have a lot of excess bezel to have to deal with when we're setting the stone. I'm going to set a little piece right on top of that curve. Do just a little bit of reshaping here to get it round again. Let's see how we did on size. That's pretty good. That's nice and snug, actually. Okay, so we're good to go on that one. So I'm going to set him in there for now. We need to start making these rings. I'll start with the top one. This is about how big it needs to be, because maybe slightly bigger than that even. Now that I added the bezel in, I kind of calculated this earlier, but I think it needs to be slightly bigger than that. So I'm going to kind of keep that in mind when I'm making this. This is a bit of 16 gauge wire I made the other day out of some scrap. So if you've never made your own wire, there's a video up there about casting ingots and making your own wire. So let's see if we can't make some nice circles here. You can use a bail making pliers or whatever. Square wire, when you bend it, it has a tendency to try and twist on you a little bit. So you want to kind of correct that as you go. Kind of bulging out that way a little bit. The hole can't be so big that the bezel falls down in there. I want it to sit pretty close to the edge of it. Let's cut it about there, and then I can gradually reduce the size of it as we go until it's just the size we want. I need this to be the size so that I can see a little lip on, showing through the bezel there on the inside, because I need that for the girdle to sit on it. So take another little piece out. We're getting closer. That actually works pretty well. This girdle is so sharp that I think I can probably do this without. I was planning on kind of angling this in a little bit. I don't know that I need to though. We'll see. Let's solder this closed. Make sure it's nice and round, and then I'll see how this looks. A little piece of solder there. I do something almost always called pick soldering. That's where I use one of these, which is a tungsten soldering pick. I will melt a little bit of solder onto the end of the pick, then it allows me to place it really precisely. I think it's a super useful skill, so if you're so inclined, I have a video, I'll put a link up there for you. Pick that up. The real trick is not sticking it in there until your piece of metal is at the soldering temperature. You got to kind of make it. Make sure we're nice and round here. We'll try to flatten this a little bit. Sometimes with something small like this, if I need to file one side of it, I'll actually use a piece of tape to hold it to it. At least makes it easier to get it started when it's a little rough. I think that'll work just fine. We'll just have to make sure we get it centered nicely when we solder it on there. I think I'm going to solder the other two rings with the spacers on before I put the bezel on though, just to make sure everything's in place. Or would it make more sense the other way? What do you guys think? Maybe it would make more sense to solder this on first. That's pretty good. I think probably the easiest way to put that on there is, let's sweat a little bit of solder on the top surface of this, and then we can just put it where it goes and heat the whole thing till it settles down. Flip this over. This is called sweat soldering, when you put a little solder somewhere in advance and melt it to it. Oh, it's already attached to one of the two surfaces, which is handy most of the time. I'm going to heat around the outside edge because the ring itself, not the bezel, is going to be the harder part to get up to temperature. The bezel's exposed on top to the flame. Yep, that'll be okay. So now we need to make those other two rings, and I want each one to be successively just a little bit smaller. So we've got this part right here. Next one down is there, and then there. Okay, let's make another ring that's a little bit smaller. That is just a tiny bit smaller, which is what I was hoping for. So I think let's solder that, and then I'll file it and clean it up and get it nice and round. Using my half-round needle file to kind of smooth out the inside a little bit. So that one's just a skosh smaller, which is kind of what I wanted. Now we need to do one slightly smaller than that, so that it kind of tapers. And then we have to make the little spacers that are going to go between them. I'll wrap whatever's left of this around something round that's kind of like the biggest size here. And then we'll use the saw to cut off precise little pieces so we can space them out. I think that's probably the best way to go. Okay, I got 3 decreasing rings. We need to cut some little spacers in here. I think I'm going to do 3 millimeters-ish. So I used a Sharpie to color this purple after I curved it around my bail making pliers here. And we're just going to try and do kind of 3 millimeters-ish. And then we'll go over and I'll use my saw to cut this off. So let's go over there real quick. If I go too far through, it's going to break off and go flying, so I'm going to stop there and bend it off the rest of the way. I went ahead and cut a few more while I was doing that. Now let's bend off this last one. I'm going to try and file that end flat a little bit. I think for this one, I might push this into the magnesia block. This is a softer surface. It allows you to push part of your piece in there. That should make it a little easier. I think let's flux everything. And I'm going to pick solder a little bit onto each of these little pieces, and then we'll try and get them positioned on there nicely. See if we can't get them to stay. We'll probably need a huge piece of solder for these. These are some minute adjustments I'm making so it doesn't look wonky. See if I can do it without bumping it too much. I'm leaving the little small pieces sticking out just a skosh. I'm going to be filing these so they're kind of smooth. Let's take a peek at that. So we've got our 3 layers now. Actually pretty symmetrical, not too bad. File the whole thing to a taper. So now we got our little kind of cage setting there. I'm going to let that pickle for a bit. And we can work on the band, which I don't think is going to be too hard. Just going to need our block here. Let's measure around a mandrel and make like a size. I think I chose a size 8. Wrap it around the 8, add about an extra 1/8 of an inch. Okay. We also need to, this is going to become part of the band, so deduct the width of that. That'll get us pretty close. All right there. By doing that, I've work hardened this really badly, so I'm going to anneal it so it's softer again. And then it'll be easier to shape into a band shape. Okay, neaten it up with the file a little bit. Mostly I'm just filing away the bumpy parts since my bench block is not very smooth. Alright. I'm going to bend it around the mandrel kind of low down here. For smaller size. Slide it up and tap it down. As it is, that's going to come out big, so I'm going to cut a little bit out of it. So I want to slide this down in there like that. Those centered. So I'm going to use the Dremel with an abrasive silicone white wheel and curve that. And also you'll notice I kind of filed it so it's vertical. This is sort of vertical. It's got a slope to it, so I'm going to have a little bit of a slope, but it's also got to have that curve going like that. So I'll be right back. So you can see I got a little bit of a curve and it's sloped just slightly that way. I pushed this down into the pad. I may push it a little bit deeper. I want this to line up right with the bottom. But I also put some marks on there so I could see where I need to position this. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some T-pins down into the pad to hold it kind of in place. I'm trying to line it up with the vertical spacers between the rings. All right, I think that's pretty good. I'm going to flux that, and I'm going to place a little bit of solder on the top of each of those. The only bad part about using these magnesia blocks like this is I buried a lot of the setting, and so that's going to protect it from getting hot, and that makes it a little harder to get that part of the piece hot enough for the solder to stick to it, so I have to really kind of focus a lot of heat down there to really pump it in from the surface there. Let's see if we can make this happen here. I believe I got it. We got it relatively straight. Wonders never cease. So I'm going to let that pickle, and then I'll polish it up, and I'll set the stone for you at the end, and then we'll get some better pictures. So I have my ring polished up, and I filed this down to where I think it needs to be, so it's just got a little tiny bit of a room to bend over the girdle. Need to get that sitting in there flat. And then I think I do this a little differently than some people do. A lot of people use a bezel pusher and a burnishing tool. I'm going to do basically the same thing with the outside edge of this. I'm going to push that up against the stone like that. Once I got it sitting flat, then I can start curving this over the top a little bit. I want to do it kind of evenly so it doesn't put any pressure and force it up on the other side. Get it in there pretty snug and flat. Once it feels like it's not going anywhere, use the rounded outer part of these to burnish the top edge. The last thing that I'll do before I take some pictures is I'll take a fine polishing silicone wheel on my rotary tool and just get that top edge just a little smoother, and then we'll be good. But that's kind of what we were going for there. And that. And that. All right. I think that's very pretty. I'm pleased with that. I'll make another one of those again sometime, maybe with a prong setting on the top instead, just for something different. But I'm very pleased with that. So, all right. Well, one other thing I wanted to say, I'm putting together a question and answer video, and if you have any questions about me or the way I do things, leave me a comment in the comments section, and I'll try and answer it when I do that video. So I need to gather up 10 or 12 good questions to answer, and then I'll do a nice video. So, all right, I'll get this polished up, take some nicer pictures, and we'll see you next time. All right, well, that was the stacked circle modern ring setting. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave, and also check out some of my other content. I have over 300 videos now If you go to my playlist tab, it's a great way to navigate all of the content that I have. So I think you'll find some value here no matter what skill level you're at. Don't forget to check out the video description down below. There's some relevant links there. There's a way to check out my website where I have jewelry for sale, and you definitely deserve some pretty jewelry. So go there and buy my jewelry. Another link is the Buy Me a Coffee thing. If you want to help out with some supplies, that's great. There's a link to my merch store where you can get one of those nice design idea books or a mug that pokes fun at my hairdo. And finally, there's a link to my Patreon stuff if you want to become a more serious supporter of the channel. So it's a great environment over there, so you should check it out. All right, well, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Take care. Happy silversmithing.